Decorating Pages is a podcast dedicated to taking you behind the scenes of the designs of your favorite TV shows and films. Each episode, I'll be sharing design stories from some of Hollywood's most famous sets. Interviews from set decorators, production designers, directors, and actors about creating the look of TV and film, about their design inspirations, and stories that take sets from page to screen. Hello, and welcome to Decorating Pages. I'm your host, Kim Wanup. Happy summer. After Memorial Day, I guess we're officially into summer, kind of, right? Almost. Well, I know it doesn't start till the 22nd officially, but you would never know it's summer in Los Angeles because it's barely getting above 65 here. I don't know what the weather is this year in LA, but it has been crazy. It used to be, I feel like when I moved here, it was like, oh yeah, we have June gloom. And then like somewhere 10 years ago, oh yeah, we have gray May. Like now it's like 2 months of you only get sunshine after 1 p.m. and it's cool and collected. And now that I live closer to the beach, I mean, I'm not getting anything. There's no sunscreen going on because there's nothing going on here. But yes, I'm enjoying the time off as much as I can, being worried, as most people are, with, how long this is all gonna go with the writer's strike. It's a good thing. I actually heard throughout the week that most likely it's going to be the Directors Guild, the DGA, settling I don't want to say problems. I don't know why I want to go with the word problems. Settling their demands or their contract. And then the actors who go out in July, and then they'll go to the writers. And that maybe seems to be how it's going to go because the DGA did sign are going to sign their contract and came to a resolution with the producers. It came out yesterday. So bravo to DGA. I have not read any of the details of what they got, so that's interesting. But the statement they put out seemed pretty good, at least the one I read on Instagram. So bravo to them for getting it done and not striking. And hopefully everybody in the DGA is happy with that. Can't please everyone, but let's move on to the writers. I did finish up a couple other things on what's one up watching I didn't talk about last week because I thought I'd save it, especially because I have one of the executive producers of White House Plumbers on this episode, Frank Rich, so I thought I'd save that to talk about the end of White House Plumbers, which was, I think, 6 episodes. I could have done another 3 or 4, I swear, but as I talk about with Frank, like, there isn't enough story to keep it going. They wrapped it up really great and, didn't overextend it. And as he talks about it is, based on all, facts, and it's just a crazy story of how Watergate and the break-ins all went down and of characters in history that aren't really written about that much, but had such a huge impact on this country's history. So I really enjoyed it. I loved the production design and the decorating and so did my puppy. And we're going to get into White House Plumbers in a little bit with Frank. But what else did I finish? Oh, finished up Barry. Now, here's the thing with Barry. I was in it and then I was kind of out and then I got back in it. I think I had read that Larry David had suggested that the series should have ended at like episode 4 when like they jump ahead in time, and I kind of agree. And then, but then we wouldn't have gotten that really good episode with all the sub characters. So then I disagree. And then I'm sorry, I'm gonna blow the ending here of Barry. So spoiler if you want to jump forward about 20 seconds. When Barry gets killed, it should have ended there. It should have went black. The ending of then seeing his son, I don't know. As a viewer, I didn't need that. I mean, I don't know. That's just me. I hate to, criticize, but why not? I think overall Barry is a good show. It's something different. It really showed you how Bill Hader can act, so that was great. And all of these other actors that got to be in it, I thought was fantastic, and opening up to people who I was unfamiliar with in acting. And so I as a series, I would definitely say watch Barry. What else? I checked out Muppets Mayhem, which is on Disney Plus. Production design by Denise Pizzini and set decoration by Don Deers and Jane Madden. My boys loved it, and it's so creative. It's really, really fun, and if you grew up with Muppets, it's just it's throwbacks, and I just like seeing the design of it, because I know that they have challenges with the heights of the puppeteers and dressing, and so I thought it's something to check out design-wise. It's really well done, so bravo to them. Now we're into this Emmy push here for people who are voting, or people want to see, what programs are trying to get votes and be nominated. And a couple years ago, IFC used to put out roundtable discussions of, I believe, nominated people, or people who were trying to get nominated for actors and directors and writers. Never production designers. But, yeah, I know, pup. Never production designers. And I loved it. I loved watching an IFC. And then somewhere along the line, either I stopped not timing it right to watch it, or they stopped doing it, or I can't even find IFC at this point. I don't even know if I have it. But The Hollywood Reporter also does a roundtable, and you can watch it online on The Hollywood Reporter / roundtables. And they did a roundtable with lead actors with Kieran Culkin from Succession, Pedro Pascal from Mandalorian and The Last of Us, Jeff Bridges from The Old Man, Evan Peterson from Dahmer, Michael Imperioli from The White Lotus, and Damson Idris from Snowfall, which I love Snowfall, and then I gave up. But very interesting roundtable with them. To me, the funniest part is all of these actors who are funny, and it's a good little show, hearing about their process and everything. But you have Jeff Bridges at the table, whose career is by far out of their league. Anyone at that table. So to me, watching the interaction of these other actors, trying to, talk to Jeff Bridges, or then relate, they'll go on their own riff about acting something, and then they're like, oh yeah, Jeff Bridges, oh yeah, you did that first, or that's how you prepared. So it's funny, and it's interesting. And I just realized, which I didn't watch because I think it just came out, they just put up their comedy actor roundtable with Jason Segel, John Maloney, Mo Amber, Stephen Yen, and Tyler James Williams. So I'll check that out. I'll let you know how that is, because guess what? We have another episode tomorrow. 2 for this week. You're getting 2 one-ups this week. Lucky dogs that you are. So on this episode, I am so excited, and you have no idea. When I first started this podcast, I have a list of wish list of guests, and Frank Rich was on it, and I have had an email in draft asking him to come on the podcast, and never had the balls to send it to him, because he's a real writer, and he's real. And I know that he's a super nice guy. I never thought he's not going to answer me or turn me. I don't know. I never thought it would, go badly. I'm just not up to his standards. That's how I feel. I worked with Frank Rich on VEEP. He was an executive producer and consulting on the show, and was a doll, and so nice, approachable, and very complimentary to all the hard work of the departments and creatives, and he was always just a really nice guy. And I remember being like, knowing who Frank Rich was. And I don't know where along the lines I knew of him, but maybe it's an East Coast thing where you just learn people and everything. So I just knew of him. So it was always a pleasure to have been able to interact with him on VEEP. So I speak with the Frank Rich on this episode. Rich is a renowned American writer who has made an indelible mark in both the theatrical and political spheres. He has been celebrated a theater critic for the New York Times, where he covered Broadway productions with witty reviews that lended to his nickname as the Butcher of Broadway, which I forgot. I didn't ask him about that. I don't even know if he likes that. I don't know. I probably shouldn't have brought that up, but it's part of his career. I mean, I don't know. I would like it. I'd like, Fear and Love. He then made a pivot in his career and turned to contributing to the New York Times and the New York Magazine, and as a political writer, offering insightful commentary on the intersection of politics and culture. He has a book that he wrote, The Greatest Story Ever Sold, The Decline and Fall of Truth from 9/11, about the Bush administration's actions and reactions to the 9/11 tragedy. And I read this book, and not that I wanted to talk to him about it, but I just tried to absorb everything Frank Rich for the last month that I knew that I would be talking to him. So I've read, there's some great articles too, I think, in New York Magazine about his whole career and that are recent. So if you really want to read up on him, please check those out. He, as if that wasn't enough, he then turned to executive producing and consulting in TV and film. His projects include the documentaries Becoming Mike Nichols and Six by Sondheim, which are great documentaries about Broadway and filmmaking. It's like a sit down with Mike Nichols talking about Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and The Graduate. I wish it went on and on for other of his projects, but just, having Mike Nichols talk about Mike Nichols is fantastic. And then, he has a gig at HBO consulting for shows like Succession, White House Plumbers, VEEP, and more. He just has such an amazing versatility and creative vision to be able to contribute to these shows. And it was an absolute pleasure to speak with him and even catch up a little, like telling him about the twins, because the last time I physically saw him, was at the wrap party. And I didn't have a big belly, but before that, I had a big belly working every day at the end of VEEP. So he's so generous to give me this time and his busy schedule, just getting done promoting the finale of Succession. He is currently working on The Regime, which stars Kate Winslet and is coming out later this year on HBO. Again, I actually don't think I blew this interview. A lot of times I'll tell you that I sound like a total dork, and I usually do. But I think I did okay here. I think I was not as nervous as I thought I would, because he makes you comfortable. He's so nice. So I hope you enjoy.
Good for you.
I'm wondering, in the last couple years, with all of your awesome projects that you've had, and I'm assuming flying back and forth with Succession to countries and everything, like with COVID, that must have been awesome and awful, right?
Yeah, well, I have to say, when there's been a lot of travel, and when Succession resumed in the middle of COVID, which was in our third season. We started, months and months late. It was one of the weirdest, and I hope never to be repeated, experiences I've ever had, because we're shooting in New York. We couldn't travel. A lot of our scenes took place in hotels that often were standing in for other places. So we had these weeks of being in these ghost hotels, the Plaza, the St. Regis, the Pierre, the Marriott Marquis in Times Square, the Sheraton on 7th Avenue, the Four Seasons downtown, the Palace And so we're in these unoccupied, often dusty hotels where there's really like a couple of security guards and then our crew, and of course, tremendous amount of distancing, social distancing,
Yeah.
lots of not just masking, but vents, constant testing, and as you know, and from your own life in this business, it's very strange to do scenes where you really. It's very hard to talk to cast. It's very hard to
Yeah.
talk to your colleagues. Forget about small talk. Just the only conversation you really have is like move that prop over there,
Right.
or take that exit instead. So it was a bit depressing, but the cast was heroic. We didn't have any big issues, and then amazingly, and then as people watch Succession know, season 3 ended up in Italy.
Right.
And we thought we would not be allowed to go to Italy. It was a decision obviously could not be made by us, it had to be made by the corporation and the guilds. And at the very last minute, we got permission to go.
Oh, wow.
And so we prepped it on a dime, ran over there. We had, a big chunk of our crew and an Italian crew that had just done that, was a Lady Gaga movie about Gotti or whatever. I didn't see it, but anyway, just done a feature. Gucci. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm confusing Italian American characters in Italy. Anyway, and it was incredible. And we anecdotally we knew that much of the Italian crew had not been vaccinated. By this point, we had been at least once, but we never had a positive test. We couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And we shot for 6 weeks, and it was an amazing thing because Italy, which had as you recall, a very tough beginning in the pandemic, at this point had bounced back. Everything was open, but no one was there. So, for instance, actors on a weekend who had never been to Venice, we didn't shoot in Venice, could go to Venice at the height of June and July and have it empty. And yet all the museums and everything were open. We had Siena to ourselves. We had Milan to ourselves. Everyone was very glad to see Americans and American credit cards.
Right.
And it was an amazing, magical experience. It was the bookend to a grim beginning. And, we were still masked and obviously being tested every day. But it was the strangest experience. And then we'd wrap, late at night in Tuscany, and I'd be in a car in a dusty roads through dusty hills heading back to where I was staying. And on Q-Tape, which I actually explained to the civilians, is this relatively new app which allows you to watch what's going on in a show that's being shot in monitors in real time. Yeah. I could, in the middle of the night, in roads to Tuscany, look at Dave Mandel directing a scene in upstate New York in White House Plumbers, which had then just begun production.
Right.
So anyway, and then we got past it.
That's incredible, and probably an experience you'll never get again on a good side, on a having that to yourself. The negative. Yeah, I'd love to never have a COVID lockdown again, and it was very hard in New York. And an actor of ours died in the early stages before we were shooting, in the very early weeks of COVID. And an actor named Mark Blum, who played the head of the cruise ships division, who gives Tom the poison chalice of a laptop with all the horrible information on it in season 1. And it was at the hearings for Congress and was going to come back in season 3. And it's one of those people, they had no treatment and he just got it. He was in his late 50s, horrible, died. Oh, that's horrible.
But the great part of Italy was, I'd love to have that again, but I'll never be there again without American tourists in warm months. I mean, there was literally no one. There weren't even any Germans. It was us.
And so hot. It's so hot it's so muggy and hot, and like in those summer months.
It was very hot. It was very hot, but it was kind of heavenly. I'll never forget it. And the stuff we made, I'm really proud of. So.
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, I was thinking of when I watch these shows, and I know that you're a part of, and then with White House Plumbers with Dave, I just think of that interaction around the monitor, and
Yeah,
that like, let's try this, or you know, people coming up with things, and it's so, it's such magic. Like, and
it is.
I, I'm sure it was like that on those shows too. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and yes, absolutely. And so to have that, have obstacles put in the way for a period of time was tough. And by the way, some of starting with Jesse Armstrong, who wrote an episode, well, one episode of the when Armando Iannucci was still running it.
Mm.
I first met Jesse. He wrote the last episode of season one where Selena cries. Met him in Baltimore. Between him, Georgia Pritchett, Tony Roach, and Ted Cohen, we had 4 VEEP writers on Succession. So the DNA of that interchange and that comedy writer thing was very similar to what you know, in some ways similar to what you saw in VEEP, you know, in some ways.
It's, to me, it's so similar because I really have to watch each episode twice because you miss. Because on Veep, you're laughing out loud and you miss like what the next character said, which is such a gem too. But with Secession, it's like, wait, what did he just call him? And what does that mean? Like, the writing is so phenomenal.
The writing's phenomenal, but it's very dense in the literary sense, I guess. But yes, and the insults, you can never get enough of the insults. And I sometimes, and we have a lot of alts, just like we did in Veep. And I keep thinking of the scene in Veep. I can't remember what scene's name was, but where Jonah is called before Congress, and the congressman reads out all the insults of Jonah. Many of them written by like people like Tony Roach, who wrote on Succession. So.
And probably half of them were edited out. There was so many.
Oh, of course. Yeah. The stuff we didn't use. There's one line in the. I hope we're not worrying about spoilers, right? We assume people.
No, I don't.
Yeah,
it's on them.
And it's not a big spoiler at that, but we're at the very end. There was David Rashi, who was also in the Veep. Is playing Carl on Succession. And he's talking to Frank, played by Peter Friedman, and he says, "So we've gone talking about going from Logan to Tom, the Waystar Corporation. So we've gone from Logan Roy to a slice of Wonder Bread with a face drawn on it." And there were many more that I just loved that never make it in, but that's part of the fun of it too, and the adventure of it.
And such a thick skin for the actors too. I always felt so bad for Timothy, who was like the nicest guy.
I know people don't understand. Some people understand, but not everyone understands. Yeah, Tim Simon is like the loveliest person in the world. He's almost like saintly, and people don't understand. And by the way, in that same category, I'd put Matthew McFadden, who plays Tom, who is about the loveliest, even-keeled person and an incredible pro. And, you know, and he's like Nick Braun, who plays Cousin Greg, they're frequently the target of the most savage insults, and they're nothing like those characters, of course.
Would you start? I read how you were involved from the very beginning of Secession. And is that in the development stage, is that like broad strokes with you and Jesse? Is it looking at like character development and who these people should be?
Well, in the case of Succession, what happened, and it may be not atypical, but it's kind of like what happened with Veep too. So what happened was Jesse had this idea. I brought it to HBO. HBO decided to buy a pilot, and Jesse fairly quickly wrote a pilot. And then, of course, it went through the usual process of me giving notes, HBO giving notes, Adam McKay was directing the pilot, giving notes, and so but it was pretty well along because we were off to the races to shoot it. I mean, and keep in mind, Jesse had a sort of a history with HBO, including a drama series that he and I had spent over 2 years developing that almost made it but didn't.
The
It
Money?
was called The Imperialists.
Oh, The
The
Imperialists.
Money was another show that actually shot a pilot I did with David Milch, but we did something called The Imperialists that never went to pilot. Still like to do. It's great. It's a great piece of writing by Jesse. So then, of course, we were picked. So we made the pilot, but very little had been planned past that. For instance, a lot of things we did on the fly. This is true of VEEP too, and keep in mind that Jesse, as a protege, began his career with Armando Iannucci, who created VEEP. Suddenly Selena's in office, out of office, at the last minute. For instance, it was not a done deal that Logan would not be killed off at the end of the pilot. He does have that stroke,
right?
And it was discussed for a bit before, and then we just made it and see what happened. And of course, Brian's performance is so, such a life force. We can't live without it. And
let's not let him go just yet.
Yeah, but then there was a writer's room. But then there was a pause because we had to write a whole season, right? And so the room had to be staffed. Jesse had done the pilot all by himself. Wow. It had to be staffed, and then it started up in London, and I would drop in and out to help brainstorm, to be a sounding board, to just listen in. It's an incredible experience, as it was being in Dave's writer's room in VEEP. A little further away, it was in London, because that's where Jesse lives. And then, it's the way it works is you're not writing in the writer's room. It's I'm telling you, Kim, stuff you already know, but for those who don't, there are whiteboards all over this conference room, and it's a grid with each episode number and each character, horizontal and vertical. What is Marcia doing here? What is Tom doing here? What is Roman doing here? And constantly debating it and doing different variations and gaming out different possibilities until finally, after several months, you have to get going, and then the scripts are assigned and writers assign different drafts. So, and then there's more and more drafts, more and more people weighing in. The director will weigh in of an episode, obviously, and very much, again, like VEEP, rewriting goes on the day all the time and keeps going on, and drafts keep being generated, and the cast keeps complaining, as they did on VEEP. The scripts are coming in too late. We can't learn them in time.
Well, I was complaining too.
Yeah, of course. And so was the person in your role.
Yeah.
So was and so yes, that absolutely all the people in charge of the look of the show, the props, production design, costumes, locations, really complicated. But somehow we always pulled it out of our ass and got it done. Somehow we did it, and it's part of it's a little bit of a relay race, but it's also a lot of creative fusion and fun conversation and hard work.
Yeah, I do think, and I've been on a couple hard shows since. I still think that VEEP was so hard because it's half hour and we shot an hour, basically. We shot so much. But the thing with VEEP that I felt was we are all in it together. And you knew, we were working the weekends. We knew, the actors are rehearsing over the weekend. The writers are, it just felt like we're all in this together. No one's skating through this at all. And everyone just wanted it to be the best it could possibly be. And I'm sure there's more experiences like that. I haven't had it yet, but...
I'm very lucky because that was the experience on Succession. It was very comparable to that.
Yeah.
And we also overshot like crazy. I mean, we overshot. We shot many more pages than we should have.
Yeah.
It was literally like the mirror image of VEEP in a lot of ways. I had the same conversations with HBO. Jesse would have the same conversations with HBO that Dave had with HBO, and then Armando had with HBO. And but everyone felt in it together. It was a really, as was the case with VEEP, lovely group of people. And
Just heart and
You
soul
know,
in there. Heart and
it's really
soul.
hard. I was like, and it was 7 years. We worked on this for
Yeah.
7 years, with COVID being part of that, but we were together for 7 years. So
when did it become clear that it was going to be Tom?
well, Jesse, I think what Jesse would say, has said, is he pretty much always knew that the end of the show would be the dissolution of the business. So in essence, none of them would get it.
Right.
I think the Tom idea started entering his head in season 3. And there, at one point in the rooms of season 3, there was a conversation of ending the season 3. Most HBO would have taken as many seasons within a reason as we wanted. We're very happy with the show, I think for obvious reasons. But Jesse is very, very conscious of. He's a very good writer. He's very conscious of not wanting to repeat himself and of bringing the story to a natural end. And as he has said in interviews too, if you call a show Succession, at some point you've got to deliver Succession.
Right.
And so in season 3 in the room, you started saying it was seriously debated among us or talked about, or discussed among us, of the virtues of maybe killing Logan off then. Jesse was always adamant or committed to 2 points. One is the season where Logan died would be the last season. Whatever season that was, that would be the last season. We'll have to resolve it after that. He also said, whatever season it is, Logan has to die in the 3rd or 4th episode because he wants the rest of the season to have the runway to figure out what happens to these kids when the sun is sort of pulled out of their solar system.
Which is brilliant. I mean, because we want to see that. We want to see those reactions. We want to see what actually happens to them.
I agree, but the regular sort of way to do it is just to have everyone in the deathbed in the final episode. And so he toyed seriously with it in season 3, but ultimately, well before we started the real writing phase, decided one more season and maybe 2 more seasons. He didn't rule out season 5, but at some point in season 4 deliberations, after we started shooting the early episodes, he had decided this was it. HBO was happy to let him, and did let him, play Hamlet about it and keep options open until we put out the poster, the key art, and started promoting the new season, because HBO wanted to promote it as the final season, if it were the final season. Right. So that affected the key art. But the cast was not told definitively until the table read of the 10th episode of the last season.
Wow.
And while some of them, they were never misled, and many were expecting it, some were genuinely sort of in denial about it and kind of shocked. It was a very teary event. But the part about Tom, it was definitely in his head the past couple of years, but I don't know. To him, I don't know if it was such a big deal to Jesse. And part of it is because Tom's victory is such a hollow victory.
Yeah.
He's just a beard for Mattson, and Mattson could get rid of him in 3 months and put who he wants. It's just to get through the deal. And so he just wanted someone who would be, in Jesse's term, a pain sponge and do the dirty work of the consolidation, but he could last as short as, say, some executives have lasted at the HBO under AT&T ownership, for instance. So I don't think it was the most important thing he was deciding. The big decision was none of the 3 kids are going to get it.
Right. Which, when you see that and you know this ending, that's the best ending. I mean, I feel like the show wrapped it up perfectly, and those final scenes of those characters are, that's it. They're living in their own hell. Like that's the way. There was never going to be a happy ending here for these people.
Exactly, and I'm really in awe of Jesse. He knows what to reveal, what not to reveal, what to say and not to say. There's been a lot of discussion, in sort of social media and criticism and reviews. Why didn't we say who won the election?
Oh,
And
well, what is
Jesse,
it?
and Jesse's point, he had 2 points. First of all, he felt as a Brit, he didn't want to be the person to decide the fate of American democracy. But I think the more important point is, to me, it's brilliant to leave it unresolved, because if you think it through, if we said Mencken won, it becomes very melodramatic. It means, the dictators, the fascists, the quasi-fascists have won, and we're delivering this devastating verdict on America, when no one, and speaking as someone who's been a political journalist, still is to some extent, anyone who follows this knows, no one knows what's going to happen in 2024. No one knows what's going to happen in this country. It's very much in flux. It's the most dangerous period of my lifetime. And no one knows what's going to happen tomorrow, So then if we had said Mencken lost, then we look like we're kind of sentimental and Pollyannish. Oh, democracy is saved, truth wins out.
Right.
So there was no reason to do it. And to leave that with the audience, Jesse's respect for the audience is huge. Let them think about it. Let them think what's best. Let them think about what's going to happen with Tom and Shiv's marriage. Let it play.
Oh, yeah.
Let it play in your head. What is Kendall's future? What is Roman's future? It gives it a greater life to me.
Yeah.
For him to say, this really is the end of the story I wanted to tell, and now it's in the hands of the audience, and it fills up an imaginative space in your head as a viewer, and I think makes the show more alive, and makes you also want to look at it again, to pick up threads that you maybe didn't notice the first time, not just dialogue, but whole threads, and because it's all in there. You take the way he used, for instance, the drowning of that cater waiter in season 1, and the way it surfaces,
the denial of it.
the denial of it, the psychotic denial of it.
Yeah.
And, that's a lot of moving pieces. And this guy really had a sense of how to manipulate them and make them work over time.
I really enjoyed how HBO gave that 5-minute interviews at the end with the director and Jesse, and helping kind of explain things just a little deeper for everyone who wanted just a little bit more every week. I love them. And they did it with The Last of Us too. I thought it was great.
Yeah, they've done it. I think they did it with Game of Thrones. They've done it with a lot of dramas. I felt these were exceptionally good. Jesse is self-conscious about giving interviews and self-conscious about appearing on camera, but he was relaxed enough this season to get into it when we did them. And there's really value added. And people who have not watched them, you're in for a treat. They're short. They're like 4 to 6 minutes long.
They're great.
But and the last one, where he basically gives his slight theories, not much to it, but a little bit about what's going to happen to the kids after the show ends, is gives you more to think about.
Yeah.
Without being definitive.
They're great. They're just little bits for you to hold on to at the end, fast forwarding through the credits to get to them. But I also loved in the funeral episode how they talked about, they didn't have much time in the location, and that made the director Mark Mylod. Is it Mylod?
Mark Mylod. Mark Mylod.
Mylod.
How you say it, yeah.
Changed how they shot it, and because they didn't have much time, and knowing that was kind of a oneer-ish is unbelievable to me.
No, it is. It's amazing. Yeah, because the funeral's held in a very, very prominent high society Catholic church, is the way to describe it, in Manhattan. It's a very big institution. It's like a city block, in Park Avenue in the East 80s. And so we didn't have, it wasn't like some diner that we could sit in indefinitely. And but Mark, very resourceful shooter among his other talents, and very good at also, without making himself or anyone crazy, very good at managing very complicated, large shoots. He did in his career a number of Game of Thrones episodes, for instance. He you think of the stuff that he did in Italy with the wedding. Oh my God! And in fact, in Wales, in the Cotswolds, the wedding at the end of season 1, the ship's wedding. It's very lucky, remarkable. He's a remarkable talent.
Yeah. No, I love seeing his aspect too of the shooting and talking about when they get the call and letting it just roll through there and knowing how that affects the set for me is like, okay, wow, they went and they walked all the way through there. Like the church all had to be dressed. There's no angles you can't see. Like things like that is always key for me of like.
Of course.
And I love that.
I know, as a great professional and as someone who solves those problems so brilliantly in your own art, it is amazing. And by the way, one of the things it's amazing to us that Logan's death did not get out. It's amazing to us.
Seriously.
And particularly because Brian, by his own account, I'm terrible at keeping secrets.
He couldn't wait.
But he's a fantastic guy, and we'll talk to anyone about anything. So two things that happen. There's three things that happen at that funeral. Or two things that are of interest. In terms of one involves the prop and one in terms of keeping. First of all, we have all these extras there.
Yeah.
We made a fake funeral program with a picture of Jamie Cromwell, who plays Logan's brother Ewan, as if it were his funeral.
Oh,
so those were given out.
Oh, that was good.
To people. And then also, Brian's wife, Nicole Ansari, is an actress. We cast her in that episode of Sally Ann, a former mistress of Logan, who's there with Marcia and Carrie, and
that was great. That scene is great.
And it ensured that Brian would show up on set. So if any passersby saw this funeral, it must be Logan. Oh no, there's Brian Cox walking in and out of the church. If he were dead, he wouldn't be part of the funeral scene.
Oh, that's fantastic. That scene, I mean, the four women should get a spin-off or something. It's like...
What? I got to tell you, Harriet Walter, they're all great. Harriet Walter, who plays Lady Caroline, a British actress, as a drama critic in a previous life, I first reviewed her playing Shakespearean ingenues for the Royal Shakespeare Company in the 1980s.
Oh, wow. She is
this brilliant actor, and what she does with that character, and Hima Abbas, who plays Marcia, is amazing, and then Zoe Winters, who plays Carrie. She was somebody who was in earlier seasons, but no one knows her because she basically had no line. She was just an aide to Logan, walking around looking at her phone the whole time, and maybe if she had a line, it was like, "He's in that office." That's about the biggest line she might have had. In the fall of 19, before the pandemic, a few months before the pandemic, she starred in an incredible play off Broadway called Heroes of the Fourth Turning. It was a runner-up for the Pulitzer Prize. Was a sort of a sensation. And I went to see it, and I said, God almighty, this young actress, she's in our cast. We had long talked about giving Logan a younger mistress who might possibly get pregnant. We hadn't figured it out. I said, she's right there on set. And she, of course, was brilliant.
Wow.
And the author of that play, that she was a very young playwright in Will Arbery, I then brought in to join the writer's room. He wrote one of the episodes this season.
Oh my gosh. See that? Now, do you miss being a theater critic? Do you miss that? No.
Oh God, no. I first of all, I stopped doing it 30 years ago.
I know.
And it's so much more fun to actually make the stuff than write about.
Oh well, yeah.
And I'm using what I learned, not so much from that job. When I was a teenager growing up in Washington D.C. and Broadway shows, hardly any do it anymore. It's too expensive. In those days, every Broadway show did a tryout, usually in 2 or 3 cities in the East Coast. And a group of cities included New Haven, Boston, Philadelphia, and Washington. And I was a theater nut. I haunted the the theater so much about so many standing room tickets that the manager took pity on me and gave me a job as a ticket taker. And as a consequence, and because my parents were so lackadaisical, when I was in junior high school and high school, I would go downtown Washington to the National Theater and watch, Neil Simon put in new scenes in a play, or with Mike Nichols, or watch Jerome Robbins put in a new dance number in a musical in a heyday of Broadway. Everything I learned from that, watching professionals, even though I didn't understand all of it, fix things or try to improve things, that's what paid off in this job. And it's also what taught me that most of what I needed to be a theater critic. But it even paid off more here because I sort of watched people fix things and learn how it might work. Oh, maybe this scene slows up the action, in a more primitive way. Or maybe, I remember seeing a play that was written by Carl Reiner, Trying Out. And it was a comedy. And there was a line in it. I don't even remember what the setup was. The line was, she doesn't care. She's retired to Miami now. And it was supposed to get a big laugh in context, and it never did. And the last week of the run before coming to Broadway, he changed it to, she doesn't care. She's retired to Acapulco now. And it brought down the house. It didn't change the meaning of the line, but somehow the K sound triggered a laugh. So you'd learn even minutiae like that. And all that stuff would come in handy for me in this work.
Oh yeah, the dialogue and the inflection and when you move on it, and when you know when you're when the actors know to like give a reaction or take a pause. It's when it works all together. It's fantastic.
It's exciting, and sometimes it doesn't work, and you try again.
I must say that probably in the last month I've read everything about you and everything. I've seen everything.
Why? That's terrible.
I read your book.
All of it.
I read your book. I read the biggest lie ever sold.
Oh,
yeah. Right?
The Bush book, yeah.
Yes, I read that. Which I do audiobooks, so I'm always because I'm always driving. Oh, wow. I do. That's all I do is audiobooks. I
never do them because I live in New York and don't own a car, so I'm never driving. So anyway, go on, yeah.
And then funny that before that, I listened to the David Milch book, which he wrote just on the onset of his Alzheimer's, which
I know
has affected me so much because I just love his work and hearing the guy who's narrating it sounds just like him, so it's so heartbreaking. Wow. It's God, so.
I only worked with him a while on the one project, The Money, where we made the pilot. I loved it, and of course, an enormous fan of it.
Yeah, I think though, are you geared towards more political things? Like, because of your political, writing.
It's a good question, but I'd say not necessarily. People come to me with those,
right?
But I'm game for anything. I really am, and there's certainly things I'd love to work on that aren't political, and shows that I admire that aren't political. And I feel a little wary of political things. I think it has to be really brilliant, or it gets very old very fast. And satire, as the saying goes, is what closes on Saturday night. And I'm because I've spent so much time writing about politics, reading about politics. I grew up in Washington, D.C. Parents were not in politics, but I was surrounded by politics. I'm happy not to have it in my life every minute, particularly now when it's so poisonous. And so I like stuff that is smart and funny, but I've also, it doesn't have to be comedy, which neither, there are moments like that in Succession or White House Plumbers, but that's not their intent for the most part, or their tone. So I'm game for anything. I like to keep learning new things. So I love working with writers. I have no interest. I'm a prose writer. I have no interest in writing scripts myself, but I love working with writers and helping them develop scripts and batting around things. And I'm interested in any subject they're interested in.
I it's another like party going on with like Mendel and then Peter and Alex and like it's like
Yes.
another VEEP party going on there. But I mean, those two guys, I the thing about White House Plumbers as a viewer is like you're learning this history. I think that I mean Liddy, I don't know. Justin Thoreau was like phenomenal and so
I,
weird. I don't even get it. I don't even get that that's a real person.
in some ways, he's not a real person,
Yeah.
or as Logan would say, not a serious person.
No.
But Justin, Dave, is such a part of his collaboration with Dave too. Justin really rolled the. I mean, Liddy was insane. He only died short. He died while we were in post.
Yeah.
But he was a true believer, and he was a lunatic and a clown, although a potentially dangerous clown. And Justin, who has a comic gene and has written comedy as a writer, but you don't think of him doing flat out comic performance on that big a scale, and it's very hard to do. And he brought it off brilliantly, and I think.
Yeah.
For many people, including me, and it seems you, and I think Dave too, it's a revelation.
Oh
There's a
yeah.
whole other side to him, and it's really hard to do that over the span of 5 episodes of a series.
Yeah, I was bummed it was only 5 episodes, but I'll take it.
Well, yeah, but I like. You saying, "Well, will there be a second season?" I said, no, before we went on the air. I said, spoiler alert.
No.
No, it still ends with Nixon resigning.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the story. But
I was trying to think, like, I don't even know. I guess I was taught that Nixon resigned, but all of these things, like, All the President's Men or, other films, I feel like that's how you get educated sometimes on events. And I had no idea. I mean, I knew that they had tried before to break in, but then they broke in, like, and then who the people actually were and how they got involved, and then like Hunt's wife dying, like it was very informative as a series for history.
Well, I think so. I was a witness to it. I wasn't yet really in a journalistic career, but I was about to be. It all happened around the time I got out of college, more or less, and of course, being from DC, I followed it and followed the Washington Post. And in fact, Carl Bernstein, Woodward Bernstein, was sort of a family friend of my family. So I watched the Dita Beard thing, but no one. First of all, I'm older. Many people didn't live through it. Secondly, what we did was very different from an All the President's Men, for instance, because we showed very little of the mucky mucks in the White House. John Mitchell, a very minor character. We never show Oldham and Ehrlichman, who were the really above John Dean. John Dean worked for these scoundrels. We showed very little of Nixon. We didn't show Agnew. We didn't show Pat Nixon. We didn't show Martha Mitchell. Part of the mission was to show these guys who were schnooks, Hunt and Liddy, who were the foot soldiers, who thought they were saving the world. They thought they were saving the world from communism. They thought they were saving America from George McGovern and the Democrats. And the fact is, they were duped. They were dupes. They should have been. They were stupid too. They should have realized what was going on, but they really were the fall guys, and they got some of the worst punishment. Where a lot of people on the top got less punishment or got away in the case of Nixon altogether. And they thought they were saving America. Instead, they bring down a president through their incompetence. And a president who was riding high. One of the points of the show is Nixon had no need to do this. He was going to win in a landslide over McGovern.
Right.
If he'd been caught naked on, top of the Washington Monument, that was going to happen. But they willed themselves into thinking they were doing something vainglorious. And then when they start to be left holding the bag for it and being the scapegoats, they don't quite realize what's happening to them. And they're not really tragic figures because they did break the law and do terrible things, and their values were kind of shoddy in their political ideology, in the case of Liddy in particular, very
Yeah.
dubious.
Yeah.
Sometime Hitler fan that he was. Um, but you have to have a little sympathy for them because they were left holding the bag. And what it did to their families was, for the most part, tragic, including Dorothy Hunt, who was herself an accomplished CIA agent and had a career. That's in All the President's Men and all when I was like in the 70s, one of the networks had a mini series about Watergate called Behind Closed Doors. There's, the Oliver Stone movie. Everything's dealt with. These guys are forgotten, but they're a big part of the story. Their families hardly noticed, and the Cuban exiles that Hunt hired because of experience with them in the ill-fated Bay of Pigs fiasco had never been dramatized at all, and so it's really there'd been no reason to do it unless there was another way to weigh in, and that's what we tried, and so even people who are familiar with the Watergate history before we made our show are learning new things.
Yeah.
And I, who knew tons about it and written about it, I didn't write about it at the time, but written about it in the past and other articles and so on, I didn't know there'd been all those previous break-ins that failed before the one where they got caught. So it was a lot of fresh research and a really fresh angle, and then a sort of fresh tone, because I'm describing it as a comic tragedy, because or a farcical tragedy, because there's elements and farce, and to some extent tragedy for these guys, and particularly their wives and their children.
Well, yeah, I in fact started to look up like what happened to Hunt's son. Like the guy just took him to Florida. Like it was like that.
It's all very sad. It's very.
Yeah, I felt like I was like, oh, this all of a sudden got very real when you start affecting these children and everything, and Liddy going to jail and his wife and everything. And I was like, God, this is turning. And I had to Google people because I was like, I need to know what happens.
No, it's and there's a lot of good stuff written about Watergate. There's a new history that came out basically after we were wrapped, Watergate, by a young historian, journalist named Gerald Graff. The original book of All the President's Men, and Woodward and Bernstein wrote a sequel called The Final Days, which is when the end is near and the whole thing is collapsing. They're great reads, I gotta say. Yeah. And of course, All the President's Men, the movie remains, which was written by William Goldman, screenplay. It was terrific and a classic. But you can go down to the rabbit hole and find all sorts of interesting stuff. The weird thing is, it looks almost like a Boy Scout prank compared to Trump, but that's not. Or one is tempted to say it because it wasn't as crazy as some of the. It wasn't as crazy as January 6th. It wasn't that really trying to stop an election. I mean, the results of an election, but it did lay the groundwork for what the Republican Party has become, and as Trump has repeatedly pointed out, particularly during his first campaign, Nixon was a fan of Trump. They had a brief correspondence. Nixon saw something in Trump, but Nixon, compared to Trump, is like Charles de Gaulle or something, or Winston Churchill, because he actually had policies. He actually did some terrible things. He opened up China, though. He created the National Endowment for the Arts. He did a few good things.
Yeah. He was a real president. He was in there for public service and
Yes, he was. And he, by the way, is a genuinely tragic figure. I've read a lot about him. My shelf behind me, I probably have more books about Nixon than any other president. Because people forget this about him. He was really the poorest modern president. He really came from nothing in Southern California. And he would, drive other boys with their girls on dates in high school to make money. I mean, the poor, and it's just an incredible career. And in 1968, when he first won, having lost to Kennedy in 60, the person who changed his image was a very young TV producer, Roger Ailes, who'd go on the big Fox News. And there's a great book about Ailes and Nixon let in a reporter named Joe McGinnis, who later, no longer alive, later become a famous journalist, to do a book that's really worth reading called The Selling of the President in 1968.
Oh,
and it's like, Roger Ailes sounding very much like the Roger Ailes of the horrible Fox News to come. But this is, 50 years ago saying things like, we've got to convince the American public that Nixon does not come home and is hung on a hook still in his suit every night to go to sleep. Or that he doesn't carry a briefcase everywhere he goes with reading material, anyway.
But
it's a great story.
Even in your book and in in the 80s and everything, it's the same names. It's the same names for so long.
Oh, it's
crazy.
It's crazy. And my first introduction to Jesse Armstrong, the creator and showrunner of Succession, was when I started doing some informal work for HBO 15 years ago. They had 2 feature scripts that they had optioned or bought but never made. One of them was about Rupert Murdoch. It was very, very different from Succession. It was very much, it was Murdoch as Murdoch with the family he had at that time, set in New York, very different, but, it was the beginning of his interest in the subject. And the other, which I couldn't believe was written by a Brit, was called Atwater. And it was about Lee Atwater, who was this legendary Southern political operative who basically got George Bush the first elected. And he's the one that came up with the very racist Willie Horton campaign where they made Michael Dukakis, the Democratic nominee, look as if he was enabling Black prisoners to escape and rape white women. It was a disgusting, ugly thing. Jesse's script about Atwater, besides being incredibly knowledgeable for someone who is British, lives in London, and it was written 15 years ago, was sort of a capsule history of the rise of right-wing republicanism up to that time. So, for instance, Karl Rove, in that script, is a 25-year-old head of the Young Republicans.
Oh, wow.
You see all these people, and it is a long story, and it begins with Barry Goldwater and Nixon, and there's a straight through line through Reagan, the Bushes, and into Trump.
Oh my God. And it's like when you watch Vice, or like you look into that history of Cheney and everything, being there for so long and working in the White House. It's crazy. I did impeachment after, or like 2 years ago now. So right. I also dug deep into like Clinton and like all of that.
Oh yeah, that I had to cover as a journalist. That was ridiculous. I mean, that in retrospect.
Well, yeah.
That was insane.
Being, at the time, I was in college, and I didn't really get the Monica thing. Like, I got it, but I was like, wow. But now I've met her, and I'm 46 years old, and I cannot believe that he did that to her. Like, it was so sad.
And also the press
killed her.
I mean, he behaved badly. The press was terrible to her. I met her too. I interviewed her after it was all over for the Times. And she's a very smart, impressive, poised person who was very young and was just, chewed up and spit out by everybody.
Awful,
and it's amazing that she has survived and become this a second here. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I guess I can't stop. Anyway, it's incredible that she survived and is going on to be, someone who taken up causes for good, tried to make the world a better place, tried to be an example of being a moral compass for people. She's very impressive, and the whole thing is.
Yeah.
But then the way the Republicans, all of whom were philandering, Newt Gingrich, but the grandstanding, all of it was ugly. Yeah. Ugly.
It's sort of, and then we go into Bush, and then we go, at least we got some clear skies during Obama a little bit, but I mean.
Yeah, I know.
There's still such deals going down.
Yeah, it's been a tough period for this country.
Yeah. Let me ask you something fun. Do you have anything right now that you're watching? that you are like, wow, everyone should watch this besides Secession and
You
White House
know,
Plumbers?
it's a very good question, and I'm going to disappoint you by not really having an answer. I think because between Succession ramping up, White House Plumbers ramping up, and being still in production because the writing was done before the strike deadline on another limited series, was
Yeah, you're busy.
I've not been watching a lot of TV. This is the first week, and I've still been, as witness us talking, still been in the sort of Succession,
Yeah.
promotional world, whatever you want to call it. And so I have a whole list of things I want to watch and catch up on, but I really wanted to clean my palate, have a palate cleanser. So I've been reading a little fiction that has nothing to do with television,
nice.
just novels, and I've been watching old movies on the Criterion Channel.
Nice.
This week, watching some British Hitchcock movies that are up there now. And I haven't looked at in years, like 39 Steps.
Oh yeah.
And The Lady Vanishes. And then I'm going to start. There's so much I want to watch. Along the way, I saw bits and pieces of things I like Station 11, Severance,
Yes.
Ted Lasso to some extent. I love Barry and Somebody Somewhere, but I'm behind on them. I'm behind on them this season, and I've got it. But there are a lot of good shows out there.
Somebody Somewhere is so good, and I know that Rachel.
It's so good.
Rachel Exler works on there. I had to reach out to her because I saw her name, and I was like, oh, I love this show. I love it.
I do too. It was just picked up for a new season.
Oh,
I
good.
saw online today.
Oh,
yeah.
Good.
It's great.
It's great.
And it's great. But there's just so much great stuff. And there's things like I want to watch Happy Valley again. I love the earlier seasons of the British, top thriller, whatever you want to call it. There's so much I want to see. I love Lucy Preble, a writer on Succession and playwright. I Hate Susie. I want to see the new season of that. So anyway, there's a lot to watch, and as the strike continues, there's a lot of time to watch it.
I know that's the problem. Is that there's so much good stuff. There's so much.
I know, but better that than it's not all Green Acres. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
We're
not all on network.
And, yeah, exactly. So there's really a lot of good stuff.
Well, I hope you have a good summer. I hope you get to. I mean, it's the writer's strike. I don't know. I'm gonna have a good summer.
I'm gonna have a good summer. So help me God. You were talking about travel. I really traveled a lot, and there was a period where I was back and forth between Studio City, where Dave was cutting Plumbers, to Barbados for the final episode of Succession, to London and Vienna, where the show The Regime I'm doing is shooting.
I know. I can't wait for that.
And I'm excited about it. And I really need a break. I'm going to tell you, I'm ready
sure you do.
to stay home. I want to see my kids and my little grandchildren.
Yeah.
And I'll travel to them, or they'll travel here, whatever as the case may be. And otherwise, and I have to go back to London one more time to wrap The Regime, the new show, but in a week or so. But then I'm going to have a nice, lazy summer, watch TV.
Yeah.
You know
what's nice? It's kind of like in the pandemic or like this writer strike. Like, there's no pressure to try to find a job because nothing's going on.
Yes, you can't do it. I can't meet with writers. I can't.
Yeah.
And so I feel for everyone out of work keenly. It's very hard. So I'm in a. When I say that I'm glad to have some time off, I don't take lightly that a lot of people I know need jobs and can't work.
Yeah,
but I so strongly believe in the writer's position on the strike that I'm glad that even at considerable cost, I think it's heroic that they're holding firm.
Yeah, and they have to, and history has shown that. Like, they had to strike to get health care. They had to strike to get, residuals. It always comes down to this.
It always does, and one of the big lead negotiators for the Writers Guild is a writer named Chris Kaiser that I've just gotten to know the past couple of years. A wonderful guy. He is one of the key co-showrunner of this terrific Julia Child series.
Julia, I love it. Oh my God, I love it.
And he is such a great advocate for his guild, and I feel they're in good hands. I feel right. I'm not in the WGA producer, but I feel what they're doing is fantastic.
I just hope it trickles down to me someday.
I hope so too. But it's great to talk with you, Kim. I hope we'll do it on set sometime soon too when this strike finally ends. I'd love.
Oh yeah, don't worry. I stay in Dave's ear to always remember to hire me.
Oh, we tried to. We were too late. We tried. We had a moment.
Okay, yes, I sounded like a total dork there, and but it was great. Wasn't that great? I mean, I can't stop. I smiled from ear to ear the whole time I talked to him. I might have a crush on him, but the just creativity and I don't know. I just love his work, and I love that he's a nice person, and I am so happy that I got to work on a show that he worked on. And I just love talking with him too. You start to talk about your work and then others' work, and just the appreciation of all of our work coming together to make great series, and it's nice to chat with him. So I hope you enjoyed that. Tomorrow, not next week, tomorrow, production designer Erin McGill and I talk about her work on the Amazon limited series Dead Ringers, which we'll get into it. A little hard to watch for me because of the twin thing, but visually, really great. Check that out if you haven't. So I hope you got an earful. I am Kim Wanup for Decorating Pages.